It's another isolation conversation, and I am joined today by Dr. Lindsay Ross-Stewart, who is an associate professor and the director of the Exercise and Sports Psychology Graduate Program at SIUE. Of course, with the SIUE Cougars, she is also the sports psychology consultant, and I'm so glad to have you, and I appreciate you taking some time.
Oh, thank you for having me. I'm happy to do this interview with you.
This is, such strange times, unprecedented times, and things that we're living through here now. And when I have talked to coaches during this conversation, during this series, a lot of them have spoken to the mental aspect of this, not just with regards to the student athlete, but to you and I, to everyday people, that we are doing something that is completely foreign to most of us. And that is this essentially 24 hours a day at home.
Right. I mean, I think one of the things that people want to talk about right away was how do we help our athletes? And that's a really important question. But the first part of that question is how do we help each other as humans, as people who are going through this experience for the first time? How do you help people between the ages of 18 and 24 who are going through something like this for the first time, which is unique and they're in different situations? So from my perspective, the first couple of weeks was really checking in and working with athletes to make sure they were feeling okay, just in general, less about the sport, but just in general, how they were feeling. Now, maybe that involved a loss of sport for our spring athletes, but for a lot of them, it involved having to move, leaving their roommates or making the choice to stay with their roommates and not being with their family during this time. And all of that is difficult. And so understanding that we're all going through something really unique, the coaches are going through it, the athletes are going through it, everybody is going through it, and working at it from that place first, I think, was really important. And what we're seeing now is that now that we're in week 3 or 4, it's really the time where athletes are starting to really think about, okay, now that I've got used to this a little bit, how do I start to really ramp up my training and use this time to my best advantage athletically? But I think if we had gone at it from an athletic perspective from day one, that really would have been a mistake, because just like everybody else, yourself and myself included, our athletes are having to adjust to a brand new way of living their everyday lives.
So I have seen this likened to, not like a loss. I mean, that's the best way to put it, especially for those student athletes like softball, like baseball, even like, the wrestlers that had a chance to get to the NCAA
Yes.
tournament. They're not going to get there. So this is truly grief, isn't it?
It absolutely is. And I think that doesn't mean it necessarily is the same as a death, but there is absolutely loss. We know that athletes go through many of sort of the stages of loss or those experiences of loss when their careers end due to injury or even when they graduate. And so certainly this is the same thing. And it happened so quickly and so suddenly, particularly for our spring athletes, or as you mentioned, our wrestlers who were planning to go to nationals that next weekend, to have that sort of unexpectedly taken away from you. And if you think about for softball or tennis or baseball, that they've been putting in all this work and they were having really successful pre-conference seasons, to sort of have this idea of what they thought was going to come and this excitement for what they've been working for. And then to have that just disappear in a matter of, seconds really for them, to find out in a meeting, okay, we're going to be off for 2 weeks. No, actually it's all season over a course of days, is really difficult. And so I think one of the really important things for athletes to realize is it is okay to feel like this is a loss. It is okay to feel terrible about it. And I think because obviously there are huge things happening in the world and people are dying, it can sometimes feel like it's selfish, or people can feel guilty that they're sad about sport in comparison. But the truth is they're two completely separate things, and you can be really sad for your own experience while also recognizing that other people are going through something very difficult as well.
I think that's a very interesting point, and I'll be really honest. It's something that I felt right off the bat, and I put something out there, but that people can say whatever they want about the importance of sport or whatever, but it is a huge part of my life, and for these student athletes, it is a huge focus of their lives, and so I like that fact that, like, hey, it is okay to feel that way when I still have empathy for those that are going through everything we're going through.
Exactly. It's not one or the other. And I think it's really important to recognize that to be a Division I athlete, the amount of work they have to put in, the amount of sacrifice they make, I mean, it is truly a huge component, if not the number one component of their identity. And that's all been stripped of them. And then on top of that, that secondary part of their identity is often being a student. And they're also having to completely change how they go to classes. Being an online student is very different than being on campus and having the campus experience and being with your friends and engaging in class discussion. And so these two huge components of our student athletes' lives have really changed. And that is incredibly difficult. That is absolutely a loss. And to say it wouldn't matter for a person, or because other people are suffering more, it's not significant, is inaccurate. It absolutely is significant, and it's important. And the best way to get through it is to recognize it and understand that it's okay to feel that way. And to your words, to also, of course, have empathy for sort of bigger things that are happening or other things that are happening in the world.
So for you, what teams, coaches, et cetera, who have you spoken to so far?
Well, so I work with a certain number of teams in general, and then athletes in general in my role with the athletics department. And so all the teams that I work with, I've been in contact with. This week has really been the first week where I started to do team meetings over Zoom, which is a very different way of doing sports psych consulting, but it makes me pretty happy to be able to see their faces and hear them in that way. So pretty much all the teams I regularly work with, I've now been in contact with or will be this week. And then from an individual athlete perspective, obviously there's confidentiality, so I can't, name things.
Sure.
I have reached out or heard from majority of my athletes. Some athletes I had never worked with before until this. I've really been trying to use Zoom. I use WhatsApp with a lot of our international athletes, or texting or phone calls to stay in contact with the athletes, because I want to be there for them, but also I miss them too. I love our athletes, and I want to be a resource as much as I can to check in on them.
It is amazing that just being able to see someone's face over Zoom, over Skype, whatever tool that we're using, that goes a long way. It does for me. It does for my kids as they are adjusting to this themselves. And I imagine it does for you, for the athletes, and for the teams as well.
It's really interesting. I said to someone else about teaching, you don't become a university professor, or at least you shouldn't, if you don't want to be around students all the time. I mean, that's why you get into a job like this in sports psychology consulting, in any kind of role in athletics. For our coaches, we're all in this for our athletes, for our student athletes. So it is really difficult to be, for our coaches, for myself, for anyone, to be pulled away from them. And then from the athlete's perspective, they are used to having a support network, whether that's their academic advisors, just people they see, their coaches, their assistant coaches that they can interact with. And so it is really important to be doing as much as we can to connect, while also recognizing that no one wants to overwhelm anyone else. So we don't want to be overwhelming our athletes by reaching out 7 times a day, but certainly, we want to be there when we can. And just seeing someone's face and seeing their smiles or their facial expressions or their recognition of what you're saying is really impactful. And you certainly see that with how many people are using Zoom these days, how impactful it is for just human beings in general.
Dr. Lindsay Ross-Stewart is with me here on the Isolation Conversation, and I want to kind of take you away from the athletic side and talk a little bit about the academic side. One of the things that I've talked about, I've been so impressed with how quickly everyone involved in the university pivoted and made this change to, now we're going to be online. They've started, we've learned how to use Zoom, all of the things that a lot of us weren't doing before. And it happened so quick, like we've already talked about. But, from your side as an academic professor, how has that been an adjustment for you and just the change?
It was definitely an adjustment. I think there has to be a lot of credit given to our administration, truly. I think they made the best decisions they could with the information they had. And especially at the beginning of all this, the information was changing, not hour by hour, but minute by minute. And they really worked hard to keep us all up to date. I really appreciate that they gave sort of that extra buffer week so faculty could work on really developing strong classes for their students. And it also gave a lot of faculty opportunities to ask their students what they wanted. So in my example, I sent out a questionnaire to all my students asking, do you want to have class, through Zoom or asynchronously? Do you, what kind of technology do you have at home? What kind of resources do you have? What are your struggles going to be? Because our students didn't just change from living on campus to going off campus, or I think sometimes it feels like all they did was just move home with their parents, but that's not the case. A lot of our students are essential workers. A lot of our students are now picking up extra shifts to support their family, working at, grocery stores and restaurants and things like that. So, and then many lost their jobs because they were servers and now their restaurants have, cut their hours extensively. So as faculty, it's been really important for us to understand that. And I think the university has given us room to do that. So that was sort of originally the challenge. And the other part is designing an online class takes a lot of time.
Yep.
And have a lot of time. So I think as faculty, we worked really hard to do the absolute best we could given the situation we were in. And I think the classes now seem to be running as best they can given the situations that we're in. And students are doing the best work they can in those situations. And the reason I repeat that sort of sentence 3 times is I think that's really an important thing for our students, for coaches, for staff, for athletes right now, to recognize this isn't the time for anyone to have to be doing their absolute best work ever. It's the time to be doing the best you can given the situation that you're in. And giving everyone's self permission to do that is important. And certainly we have done that for our students, for ourselves, for athletes, to recognize that this is unique. You may not have all the perfect tools. You may have a lot of other things going on in your life. So just do the best you can in this situation.
So now, how about you as a mom? You have 2 kids at home. Your husband is working from home. You've had to make a huge adjustment that way. How is that going?
Well, you can see I'm in my daughter's room because that's where I could fit myself right now. So, we're very proud that 3 of the 4 of us in this house are Gryffindors, as you can see from our poster. But honestly, the adjustment has been okay. I really, really miss seeing students and interacting with students and seeing my athletes. That part has been probably the biggest adjustment for me personally. But we're really lucky because my husband and I are both able to work from home. So we both kept our jobs. We have yard space, which I think is a real luxury and a privilege right now, to have space for our kids to go outside. So for the most part, we're doing really well. It's definitely an adjustment. Our scheduled calendar is usually pretty full of different sporting events someone has to go to. And now it's pretty much just filled with who's doing Zoom meetings when, so we can make sure that we're all matching those up. But really, for the most part, I think our transition has been pretty smooth compared to, I know, what a lot of other people are going through.
And I imagine that your consulting will continue and maybe expand. Like you said, I thought it was interesting that, you've heard from some student athletes that maybe you haven't heard from, but, we still don't have an end date. There's a lot unknown still. And I think that's a big part of it.
Absolutely is a big part of it. Having a final day allows people to sort of say, okay, I'm going to be doing this for this amount of time and to prepare. And unfortunately, this is a situation where that's just not possible. And that is absolutely something that I've heard a lot from our athletes about, the struggle of not knowing how long they're going to be in this. I think all of us have heard that just from neighbors and friends, the difficulty of how not knowing how long we're going to be in this. So for me in consulting, I will continue to consult using all the different technology we have for the athletes as much as possible. We also do, coach roundtables, and we do work with coaches as well through technology. So my intention is just to continue to do that as much as possible. Because I often do consulting through technology and telecommunications in the summer anyway, that part of it is a little bit of a normalcy for me.
So I just want to thank you for taking some time and for, talking to us and giving us and giving really Cougar fans kind of an idea of what your role is and what folks are going through during this tough time, and that it's okay to not know what we're feeling right now.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much for having me. And just to sort of summarize that, I think in sports psych we say a lot, or even in the world of mindfulness, they say a lot, like, be where your feet are. And I think that is a really important thing right now, to recognize this is where you are. Try not to think too far forward to what's going to happen in 3 weeks or 4 weeks, but instead, hey, I know what I'm doing today. What can I do today? What's my schedule for today? And athletes being able to do that and sort of just recognize where their feet are and that that's all they have to worry about can be a really effective way to sort of handle some of those stressors and some of the challenges that we've talked about through this conversation. So thank you for giving me a chance to talk about it.
Outstanding. And maybe we'll check in again. Hopefully the next time that you and I get to chat, it's when we're sitting at a sporting event again.
That would be great.
Awesome.